Long before the snow, before the forest, before the abandoned car on a dark mountain road, there were 5 ordinary lives moving through familiar routines in Northern California. Yuba City in the late 1970s is not a place of mystery. It's flat, agricultural, predictable. Streets run straight. Days repeat themselves. People know their neighbors. For the families of the 5 men at the center of the story, routine isn't just comfort. It's stability, something carefully built and closely guarded. Jack Madruga lives a quiet life. He's 28, works at a job he takes seriously, and takes pride in small things most people barely notice. His car matters to him. He keeps it clean. He doesn't lend it out casually. He avoids rough roads and bad weather whenever he can. Friends and family describe him as cautious to the point of stubbornness. Jack doesn't improvise. He plans. He dislikes surprises. He is the kind of man who double-checks locks before bed and prefers known routes over shortcuts. Bill Sterling is 32 and lives with his mother. He has a gentle demeanor and a deep attachment to routine. Bill is observant, sensitive to changes in environment, and easily unsettled when plans shift unexpectedly. He prefers structure and reassurance, the quiet certainty that tomorrow will look like today. When Bill commits to something, he commits fully, but only if it fits cleanly within the boundaries of what feels safe. Ted Weiher, also 32, lives at home with his parents, who are deeply protective of him. Ted has mild intellectual disabilities, but he is social, expressive, and proud of his independence. He loves sports, especially basketball, and takes his role on the team seriously. He dislikes the cold intensely. Family members later say that Ted avoided snow whenever possible and became distressed when he was uncomfortable. He is not an outdoorsman. He is not adventurous. He is someone who needs warmth, reassurance, and familiarity. Jack Hewitt is 24 and known for his humor. He has a speech impediment that sometimes makes him self-conscious, but among friends he is relaxed and joyful. He trusts people easily. He laughs often. He depends heavily on the group dynamic. The shared rhythm of doing things together the same way every time. Gary Mathias stands apart from the others. He is 25, taller, physically stronger, and more independent. He served in the military. He knows how to navigate outdoors. He understands how to survive in difficult conditions. Gary has schizophrenia, but it is managed. He takes medication. His doctors and family believe he is stable. When he is compliant with treatment, he is clear-headed, responsible, and capable. This distinction matters because later, when things go wrong, many people will focus on Gary as the possible cause. But at this stage in his life, there is no indication that he is dangerous or unstable. In fact, if anything were to go wrong, Gary is the one person in the group with the skills to respond effectively. Together, the 5 men form something rare, a close-knit, functional unit. They are part of a basketball team for adults with developmental disabilities. They practice together. They travel together. They attend games together. Their families coordinate rides, schedules, meals. Everyone knows where everyone else is supposed to be. This structure is not incidental. It is the framework that keeps their lives running smoothly. On Friday, February 24th, 1978, that framework is intact. That evening, the 5 men are scheduled to attend a basketball game at California State University in Chico. It's a special night. One of them has an upcoming tournament, and the game feels like both a treat and a rehearsal. Families help them get ready. Jackets are chosen. Schedules are confirmed. There is excitement, but it is contained, orderly. Jack Madruga drives. They leave Yuba City together in his Mercury Montego. a car that reflects its owner's personality, clean, well-maintained, unremarkable. The drive to Chico is familiar. They've done it before. The road is straightforward, the weather cool but manageable. There is no snow on the ground in Yuba City. Nothing about the night suggests danger. At the university, the game unfolds like any other. Witnesses later recall seeing the 5 men in the stands. They cheer, they talk, they buy snacks, they are relaxed. There is no argument, no sign of distress, no hint that anything is wrong. This matters because it establishes something critical. Whatever happens later does not begin with chaos, panic, or emotional volatility. It begins from calm. After the game, the men return to the car. It is late, but not excessively so. They begin the drive home. This is the last moment when their actions align perfectly with expectation. Instead of turning south toward Yuba City, Jack Madruga drives east. At first, this might not feel alarming. Roads intersect. Mistakes happen. But the longer the car continues in that direction, the stranger it becomes. Familiar landmarks disappear. The road narrows. The terrain begins to rise. Town lights fade. The air grows colder. Oroville-Quincy Road is not a casual detour. It leads into the mountains, into forest, into areas known for snow accumulation even when lower elevations are clear. It is poorly lit, winding, and remote. In winter, it can become dangerous quickly. Jack Madruga knows this. Everyone who knows him knows this. Yet the car continues. There is no record of conversation inside the vehicle. No diary, no audio. We don't know who noticed the wrong turn first or when. We don't know if anyone suggested turning around, or if they believed they were heading somewhere intentional. What we do know is that at some point, snow appears along the edges of the road. Then more snow, then deep snow. Shortly after midnight, the Mercury Montego comes to a stop. When it is found later, investigators will note how carefully it is positioned. It is not angled awkwardly. It is not damaged. It is not buried. It is parked neatly along the roadside, facing uphill, as if the driver had deliberately pulled over and turned off the engine. The gas tank is not empty. The car is functional. There is no evidence that it became stuck. The men get out anyway. This single decision, leaving a working car, will become the anchor point of the entire mystery. Jack Madruga hated the cold. Ted Weiher hated the cold even more. None of them were dressed for prolonged exposure to freezing temperatures. None of them carried survival gear. None of them had a reason to believe help was nearby if they continued on foot. And yet, footprints in the snow will later show that 5 men walked away from the car, uphill, into darkness, toward deeper wilderness. Not running, walking, as if they believed they were going somewhere specific, as if they believed this was temporary, as if they believed they would return. That belief, whatever it was, is the last shared assumption the 5 men ever make together. The forest waits ahead, silent and indifferent, and the road behind them fades into snow. The snow around the car is quiet. There is no wind recorded that night strong enough to explain panic. No blizzard tearing at visibility. Just cold, darkness, and a road that climbs steadily into forest. The footprints leading away from the Mercury Montego are not chaotic. They are not scattered or overlapping in confusion. They move in a single direction up the road, as if the 5 men agreed, silently or explicitly, that this was what they were supposed to do next. The snow is deep enough to hold impressions, but not so deep that walking would have been impossible at first. Whatever decision was made at the car, it was not made in a moment of wild fear. It was made calmly enough to result in order. This detail will later trouble investigators more than almost anything else. If the men had believed the car was dangerous, leaking fumes, on the verge of fire, or otherwise unsafe, it would make sense to move away from it. But it would not make sense to move uphill into colder, more isolated terrain. If they believed they were lost, walking further away from known roads and towns would only compound that mistake. If they believed help was nearby, it was in the wrong direction. And yet, step by step, they went. The road winds through Plumas National Forest, a landscape that becomes increasingly hostile in winter. Trees crowd in close. Snow piles unevenly. Sound is absorbed and softened. Even a short walk can feel disorienting at night, especially without a clear destination. At some point after leaving the car, the group splits. This is not immediately obvious from the evidence, but it becomes clear later when bodies are found in different locations. Whether the split happened intentionally or as the result of exhaustion, confusion, or physical limitation is unknown. What is known is that from this point on, the group no longer moves as a single unit. Searchers will later determine that some of the men continued toward the Forest Service trailer, while others did not make it that far. The trailer itself is a crucial detail, and one that makes the story even more unsettling. The Forest Service had placed it in that area as a seasonal shelter, a place where rangers could rest, warm themselves, and ride out storms. It was stocked deliberately. Canned food, blankets, fuel, matches, a propane heating system capable of warming the entire interior. It was not hidden. It was not locked. It was effectively a lifeline. The problem is that the men should not have known it was there, unless someone led them, unless someone remembered, unless someone stumbled upon it by chance. Gary Mathias, with his military background, may have been familiar with such structures. He may have recognized the signs of a ranger station or shelter. If anyone in the group could have guided the others toward it, it was him. But this is speculation layered on top of absence, and absence dominates the case from this point forward. As the men move deeper into the forest, the temperature drops further. Snow becomes heavier underfoot. Fatigue sets in. For people unaccustomed to winter trekking, every step costs energy they do not have. One by one, some of them begin to fail. Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling are eventually found miles apart, away from the trailer and away from each other. Their bodies lie beneath trees, partially covered by snow. There are no signs of violence. No defensive wounds. No indication that they fought anyone or anything. They simply stopped moving. Exposure takes them quietly. Jack Hewitt makes it farther. He is found closer to the trailer, though still outside it. His death, like the others, is attributed to hypothermia. The pattern that emerges is not one of sudden catastrophe, but of gradual depletion. Energy draining away, decisions slowing, bodies losing the ability to correct small mistakes. And then there is Ted Weiher. Ted reaches the trailer. This alone defies expectation. Ted disliked the cold. Ted struggled with physical endurance. Ted was not known for initiative under stress. And yet he survives long enough to reach shelter while others do not. When searchers open the trailer months later, what they find feels almost staged in its wrongness. Ted's body lies on a bed, wrapped in sheets. His shoes are off. His feet are severely frostbitten. His weight loss is extreme. He has been alive inside that trailer for a long time, possibly weeks. There is food within arm's reach. Canned goods that require no cooking. There are matches. There is propane. There is a heater that, had it been turned on, could have kept the interior warm even during the coldest nights. Ted does not use them. The cans remain unopened. The heater remains off. This detail becomes the emotional core of the case. It is the moment where logic begins to fracture. Some suggest Ted was too cognitively impaired by hypothermia to function by the time he reached the trailer. But his beard growth and physical condition suggest extended survival. Others argue that he may have been waiting for the others to return, waiting for instructions, waiting for someone to tell him it was okay to use supplies that did not belong to him. Ted lived in a world governed by permission and routine. Breaking that routine, even to save his own life, may not have been something he could do. This interpretation is uncomfortable, but it aligns with what his family later describes. Ted was capable, but he relied heavily on rules, on knowing what was allowed. In that trailer, alone, cold, and deteriorating, he may have been trapped not just by winter, but by expectation. Somewhere in this timeline, Gary Mathias disappears. His absence is absolute. Unlike the others, whose bodies are eventually found, Gary leaves no trace. No clothing. No remains. No confirmed footprints leading away from the trailer or deeper into the forest. Search teams comb the area repeatedly. Dogs are brought in. Nothing. This absence gives rise to theories almost immediately. Some believe Gary, physically stronger and more capable, survived longer and wandered off in search of help. Others believe he succumbed to exposure and lies undiscovered somewhere in the vast forest, his remains scattered or buried beyond recognition. A few suggest darker possibilities, that he intentionally left, that he experienced a break from reality, that he fled. But all of these theories run into the same problem. Gary was known to be responsible with his medication, stable in behavior, and deeply protective of his friends. If anyone in that group would have stayed with Ted, would have turned on the heater, would have opened the food, it should have been Gary. And yet, Gary is gone. The search that unfolds over the following weeks is exhaustive but slow. Winter does not give up its secrets easily. Snow buries evidence. Time erases footprints. Families wait by phones that do not ring. When the trailer is finally found, the discovery answers some questions and creates many more. The distance from the car to the trailer is staggering, over 20 miles through mountainous terrain. This is not a distance casual walkers cover by accident, especially not at night in winter without gear. How they managed it at all is astonishing. Why they failed to survive once there is devastating. By the time summer arrives, the case has transformed from a missing persons investigation into something far stranger. The deaths make sense individually, hypothermia, exposure, but together they refuse to align. The sequence of choices does not match what anyone who knew these men believes they would have made. And hovering over everything is the empty space where Gary Mathias should be. The forest has not given him back. By the time the trailer is discovered, winter has already loosened its grip on the mountains, but the damage has been done. Snow still clings to shaded slopes. Cold lingers in the trees. What happened inside that metal shelter belongs to the silence of the months before anyone arrived. The Forest Service trailer sits in a clearing, unremarkable in daylight. It is not hidden. It is not camouflaged. It is meant to be found by anyone who needs it. For rangers, it represents safety, a place to wait out storms, to warm frozen hands, to survive when plans collapse. For the Yuba County 5, it should have been exactly that. Inside, everything is still. The beds are narrow, utilitarian. Blankets are folded. The propane heater is mounted against the wall, connected to fuel. Canned food is stacked neatly, untouched. There are matches in a container. There is enough here to keep a person alive for weeks, even months. Ted Weiher lay in the middle of it all and died anyway. The position of his body tells a story, though not a clear one. He is wrapped in sheets, suggesting an attempt at warmth. His shoes are removed, either because they were wet, painful from frostbite, or simply uncomfortable. His feet show severe damage, tissue blackened, toes destroyed by cold. He had suffered, and he had suffered for a long time. Investigators later estimate that Ted may have survived for as long as 8 to 13 weeks after arriving at the trailer. That estimate alone is astonishing. It means he endured through multiple storms, through long nights of isolation, through hunger and pain and cold that never truly relented. He was not unconscious. He was not immediately incapacitated. He lived, and during that time he did not open the food. This detail becomes the heart of the mystery, not because it is impossible, but because it forces an uncomfortable confrontation with how the human mind behaves under stress, fear, and disintegration. Ted was not starving in the presence of abundance because he was ignorant. He knew the food was there. The cans were visible. They were within reach. But using them would have required action, choice, permission, a breaking of routine. Ted had spent his life operating within boundaries defined by others. When to eat, where to go, what was allowed. Alone in that trailer, with no instructions and no reassurance, his world may have collapsed inward. Hunger weakens the body. Cold dulls the mind. Hypothermia does not always kill quickly. It erodes judgment first. Ted may have been waiting for Jack to return, waiting for Bill, waiting for Gary, waiting for someone to tell him what to do. Outside the trailer, the forest holds the rest of the story. Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling are found under trees, miles apart. Their positions suggest collapse, not conflict. They did not die together. One fell, then another, each losing the fight alone. There is no sign that they reached shelter or fire. They likely slowed, stopped, and never stood up again. Jack Hewitt's body lies closer to the trailer. He almost made it. Whether he saw it, whether he knew safety was just ahead, cannot be known. Hypothermia often creates a cruel illusion of warmth just before the end. People lie down believing they are resting. They close their eyes believing they will wake up. And then there is the space where Gary Mathias should be. His absence reshapes everything. Gary was physically stronger than the others. He had military training. He understood navigation. He understood cold. He should have been the one making decisions, conserving resources, organizing survival. If anyone could have turned that trailer into a lifeline, it was Gary. And yet, Gary is gone. Some investigators believe Gary may have been injured early and separated from the group. Others believe he may have taken responsibility for seeking help, leaving the trailer to walk toward civilization. If so, he chose an almost impossible route. Miles of deep forest, steep terrain, and unpredictable weather. Search teams later say that if Gary had died in the open, they should have found something. A jacket, a boot, bones. But nothing appears. This complete erasure fuels speculation. Some suggest animal activity scattered remains beyond recognition. Others suggest that Gary survived longer than anyone else and wandered far beyond the search radius. A few suggest something darker, that he intentionally disappeared, overwhelmed by guilt or fear. But those who knew Gary reject that idea. He was protective. He was loyal. He took responsibility seriously. He would not have abandoned Ted to die alone if he had any choice. Which leads to the most unsettling possibility of all. That something happened to Gary before the others reached the trailer. That the group fractured not by decision, but by circumstance. That the order in which bodies are found does not reflect the order in which people failed. The investigation struggles to keep up with these contradictions. Officially, the cause of death is exposure. That much is clear. But exposure does not explain behavior. It does not explain direction. It does not explain why men walked past safety or why safety failed when it was finally reached. Families push for answers. They speak to investigators. They revisit the route. They question assumptions. They want to know why their sons, brothers, and friends did not do what anyone else would have done. Why not turn the heater on? Why not open the food? Why not stay together? Why leave the car? The answers never solidify. As years pass, the case settles into an uneasy category, explained enough to be closed, but strange enough to be remembered. It becomes a cautionary tale, a psychological puzzle, a story told quietly among law enforcement and outdoorsmen, each retelling emphasizing a different detail. And slowly the comparison begins. People notice the parallels. A group acting against its own best interest. A retreat from safety instead of toward it. Shelter unused. Resources ignored. One person missing entirely. The Yuba County 5 begins to be called America's Dyatlov Pass. Not because the cases are identical, but because they trigger the same discomfort. The sense that something essential is missing from the explanation, that a step between cause and effect has vanished, leaving only outcomes. And like Dyatlov, the more rational the theories become, the more the emotional question remains unanswered. Not what killed them, but how exactly everything went so wrong at once. Gary Mathias remains the unanswered question at the center of the Yuba County 5. Not because his life was more important than the others, but because his absence refuses to cooperate with the rest of the story. When people try to make sense of what happened in the mountains, they often start with Gary. He is the one with a diagnosis, the one with a medical file, the one whose mind, in the public imagination, can be used to explain the inexplicable. It is an easy move and a misleading one. Gary's schizophrenia had been diagnosed years earlier. He had struggled in the past, yes, but by 1978 he was considered stable. He took his medication. He held jobs. He had served in the military. He lived independently at times. Doctors later stated that he was not prone to sudden violent breaks or hallucinations when properly medicated. His family described him as responsible and protective, especially toward the others in the group. The night of the basketball game, there is no evidence that Gary was unwell. Witnesses saw him behaving normally. He cheered. He joked. He planned for the tournament ahead. Whatever happened later did not begin as a psychiatric crisis. And yet, Gary disappears in a way that no one else does. His shoes are never found. His jacket is never found. No confirmed trace of him exists beyond the general direction the group traveled. The forest, vast and indifferent, absorbs him completely. Some investigators suggest that Gary may have been without his medication by the time the group reached the mountains. If he lost it or ran out, his mental state could have deteriorated over days or weeks. But this theory assumes he survived longer than the others, long enough for withdrawal or relapse to matter. There is no evidence of that survival, only the possibility of it. Others suggest that Gary took on the role of rescuer, that he left the trailer deliberately, planning to find help, believing it was the only chance to save Ted. This theory aligns more closely with what people knew about him, but it also demands a near-superhuman endurance. Miles of deep forest in winter without proper gear, without food, without certainty of direction. If Gary attempted this, he almost certainly died trying. And still, nothing of him was found. Search teams returned to the area repeatedly. They widened their radius. They searched in summer, when snow had retreated and the forest floor was visible. They brought in dogs. They found nothing. The absence becomes so complete that some begin to question whether Gary ever made it to the trailer at all. If Gary died earlier, if he collapsed somewhere between the car and the shelter, then the entire narrative shifts. The others would have lost their strongest member first, leaving them more vulnerable, more confused, more likely to make poor decisions. Ted, arriving alone or nearly alone at the trailer, may already have been cognitively impaired by cold and fear. The food, the heater, the matches, all meaningless if the mind no longer trusts itself to use them. This possibility is less dramatic than conspiracy, but more tragic. It suggests not a single catastrophic error, but a chain of small failures that fed into one another. A wrong turn, a car abandoned for reasons that felt logical at the time, a walk that seemed manageable until it wasn't, separation, exhaustion, cold, fear, and finally paralysis not just of the body but of the will. In the years that follow, officials closed the case. The cause of death is listed as exposure. No one is charged. No one is blamed. The forest keeps what it took. But the families never stop asking questions. They point out the improbabilities, the distance, the direction, the untouched food, the heater left cold. They ask why 5 men who relied so heavily on routine would suddenly abandon every rule they lived by. They ask why safety was rejected at every stage, the car, the trailer, the supplies, and there are no answers that fully satisfy. Like Dyatlov Pass, the Yuba County 5 resists being neatly categorized. It is not a crime story in the traditional sense. It is not a survival story with a heroic arc. It is not a puzzle with a clever solution hidden in plain sight. It is a story about people reaching the limits of their ability to cope, all at once, in a place that offered no margin for error. Over time, the comparison to Dyatlov becomes more than a nickname. Both cases occupy the same uncomfortable space. In both, experienced or capable people abandon shelter. In both, the environment is lethal but not extraordinary. In both, the final explanations feel adequate on paper and inadequate in the mind. You can explain the cold. You can explain the terrain. You can explain hypothermia, confusion, exhaustion. What you cannot fully explain is the moment when safety was available and not taken. That is the fracture point in both stories. Somewhere on that mountain road in Yuba County, something convinced 5 men that leaving was better than staying. Somewhere between the car and the trailer, something convinced them that continuing forward made more sense than turning back. And somewhere inside that trailer, something prevented a man from opening food, from lighting heat, from saving himself. Those moments are gone now. Whatever was said, whatever was believed, whatever fear or misunderstanding shaped those choices, it disappeared with them. Today, the Mercury Montego is long gone. The road is quiet. The forest has grown back around the paths once searched by volunteers and deputies. The trailer still stands, rusted and empty, no longer stocked, no longer a refuge. And somewhere beyond it, Gary Mathias remains missing, not as a symbol, not as a suspect, but as a reminder of how completely a human life can vanish when circumstances align in the wrong way. The Yuba County 5 were not reckless. They were not thrill seekers. They were not trying to test themselves against nature. They were doing something simple, going to a basketball game and coming home. That they never did is what gives the story its power. Not because it is supernatural, not because it is conspiratorial, but because it shows how fragile order can be, how easily routine can collapse into confusion, and how quickly ordinary decisions can lead into places with no return. 5 men walked into the mountains that night believing, at every step, that they were still on a path that made sense. And that belief carried them all the way to the end. This was the story of the Yuba County Five. Feel free to find more similar stories right here on this channel. Until then, I wish you a warm good night.